Well, I'm Annaliese, as she said. I am currently a student at UCCS for their art program. It was a unexpected decision going back to school, so it's been quite a journey. And this body of work, which is really my first body of work I've ever produced, um, came out of last semester in an abstraction class. And it was really fascinating going from doing really exploring abstract painting and seeing using a different material and figuring out with a different material how I could also create abstraction that holds like a huge amount of significance and symbolism. And um, yeah, I really credit one of my professors for help leading me in that direction. But the idea of using tea bags came out of me moving back from California in 2021 after kind of running away and escaping a really toxic relationship. And I was left feeling much like a used tea bag, something that had been taken, enjoyed, and just kind of like discarded. And that I didn't know how to create to process, because a lot of artists, we use materials and mediums and things to process our life, to process the way we see things or things that we experience, and also just big life events that take place, whether they're good or bad, and usually they're really hard, and that's what we're processing through. And yeah, it was interesting to find a medium and finally be able to create something after a year and a half. It took me a year and a half to kind of process through things and going through lots of stages of growth. And um, tea bags really became this powerful symbol. And when you start taking them apart, when you use them, you dry them, you start taking them apart, they become incredibly delicate, way more delicate than they are wrapped in their tea bag form and shape. And taking those apart and figuring out how to stitch them together, and things tearing frequently. I mean, you look in there, and if you look close enough, you can see a lot of the tears and the scars and the flaws within. And it just spoke deeper into who I am and how much need there is for redemption through that brokenness. And I've really been interested in a lot of different Japanese practices. And so taking those Japanese practices and the kind of philosophy behind them, the theology behind them, and turning taking those ideas and using the ideas behind it in a very different way, to produce something that was very new to me. And it felt a lot like a patchwork quilt. Um, when I was young, uh, did a program through my parents' work, and they had us pick. It was like a quilting program, and we had to pick different sections of or different pieces of fabric in like these scrap bins. And all of the students picked everything that you liked at age like 9 or 10. And then the teacher would come around and give you ones that you were like, no, I don't want that one. They're like, exactly, you must have this one in your piece. And so we had to sew them all together. And that kind of memory flooded back in throughout this body of work, where there are pieces of us that we don't always like and we don't want to revisit, and they're uncomfortable or they're broken and they're flawed, and we're very human. And yet we um, we had to sew those pieces together to create this beautiful piece. And I felt like that was the tea bags, taking them, sewing them together. It was a very meditative process. Megan, we have that and, um, in common. And yeah, just learning how to sit with your own brokenness is a really challenging place to just constantly dwell in. And this work is very time consuming. So you have to get very comfortable with sitting with your own mess. And I did not like it a lot of the time, most of the time. And it was frustrating because you would get the needle through, and then all of a sudden everything you had just done would just completely tear. And it was like, well, I guess this has to be a part of it because that is me and that's who I am and beautifully flawed. So that is a style of writing called asemic writing. And with asemic writing, you're essentially capturing the essence of writing or the movement of your hand across page. So asemic writing, it really doesn't matter what like phonetic language you are using or phonetic alphabet you're using, but you can capture the essence of movement of words. So throughout each of those, I was thinking of um, uh, thinking of what I was writing, but essentially just capturing the movement of the words. Yeah, and it's an interesting way to make um, writing more op- um, transparent. Like you can't really tell what is being written. So, yeah, kind of abstracts it. So for everyone, this is my grandmother. She has more context. um, so over the semester, we have to choose a hypothetical mentor. And I chose a Japanese American artist named Makoto Fujimura. And he works a lot in a practice called kintsugi, where you're taking broken pottery. Um, I think it started with teaware specifically, and you're mending them and like finishing it with gold so that the broken piece ends up being more beautiful than it originally started as, with the gold adornment. And so I took that, kind of the philosophies of that, of mending something and making it more beautiful in the end. And I feel like through processes of healing and growth and redemption in our lives, we can become more beautiful through that process. And when we go through really hard things, it's important to become better and not bitter. And that will also grow you into a more beautiful person. And so with the tea bags, I felt like I was able to take these broken pieces with the more perfect ones that had either no staining or beautiful staining to it and attach them to create a more beautiful, cohesive piece. Because just individually, you look at it and it's like, oh, it's just a tea bag. But then when you start layering them and putting them together and figuring out, okay, I'm just gonna put this one here and this one's going this way, and you kind of like build your patchwork quilt. Feels like you're kind of stitching yourself in a way. Yeah, I like the second one. That wasn't what I was going. That wasn't what I was my original thought process in that. So I like that because it fits perfectly with, I think, my body of work. But it was definitely the first two. It was an experimentation of materials and found objects and figuring out how to kind of collage them together, bring them together, and the third being a symbol of Trinity, which is why our pieces work so well again. And yeah, and through that, the redemption that comes through